People always think they know your marriage from the outside, but they don't see the daily grind, the way someone can just settle into being boring. I'm Peyton, I'm 41, and I spent 15 years with Sam. 12 of them married, thinking I had it all figured out. We had this whole child-free thing locked down, even got my tubes tied 5 years into marriage because we were that sure about our path. Sam was supportive, drove me to the surgery, took care of me during recovery, the whole devoted husband act. We built what everyone called a comfortable life. Decent house, couple trips a year, retirement plans that actually made sense on paper. But here's what nobody tells you about comfortable. It's suffocating. Sam had this way of turning everything into a routine. Morning coffee at exactly 7:15, same breakfast rotation, same predictable conversations about work and weather and what we should watch on Netflix. He'd gotten soft around the middle, started wearing these awful polo shirts that made him look like someone's suburban dad, which I guess he kind of was, minus the kids. His idea of excitement was researching vacation destinations for 6 months before booking anything, then planning every meal and activity down to the minute. The thing is, I used to find his stability attractive. When we first got together, I was coming off this intense relationship with Randy, this passionate, artistic guy who painted murals and wrote poetry and made me feel like I was living in some romantic movie. But Randy was also unreliable, broke most of the time, and eventually left me for this 22-year-old art student. So when Sam came along with his steady job and his 5-year plans and his genuine interest in building something real, it felt like growing up, like I was finally making smart choices instead of following my heart off some emotional cliff. Except 15 years later, I'm sitting across from Sam at dinner watching him methodically eat his pasta, and all I can think about is how Randy used to make me laugh until my sides hurt. How he'd surprise me with midnight adventures and spontaneous road trips and conversations that lasted until sunrise. Sam's idea of deep conversation was asking if I remembered to schedule the oil change. Don't get me wrong, Sam wasn't cruel or anything, he was just there. Predictably, reliably, boringly there. That's when Randy reached out on social media. Just a simple, "Hey, saw your post about the art exhibit downtown, thought you'd appreciate this," with a link to some gallery opening. Innocent enough. But then we started messaging back and forth, and it was like stepping back into this version of myself I'd forgotten existed. Randy remembered things about me that Sam had never even noticed. How I used to sketch in the margins of notebooks, how I'd get completely absorbed in documentaries about lost civilizations, how I could spend hours in used bookstores just breathing in the smell of old pages. The conversations evolved naturally. Randy was between living situations, working on his art, processing some personal growth stuff. He'd matured, he said. Realized what he'd lost when he let me go. And I found myself looking forward to his messages in a way I hadn't looked forward to anything in years. When Sam would launch into his detailed recap of some workplace meeting, I'd be thinking about Randy's latest message about this painting he was working on, inspired by our old conversations. I started staying up later, claiming I needed time to decompress, but really I was texting Randy. Sam never questioned it, just assumed I was going through some phase and gave me space. Which was typical Sam, really. Never pushing, never demanding attention, just accepting whatever scraps of engagement I offered. Part of me wanted him to notice, to fight for my attention, to show some sign that he cared enough to be jealous. But he just kept following his routines, trusting that everything was fine, because I hadn't explicitly told him otherwise. Randy started talking about regrets, about roads not taken, how he'd spent 16 years wondering what would have happened if he'd chosen differently, how he was finally in a place where he could commit to something real, something lasting. And when he mentioned wanting kids, something he'd never wanted when we were together before, it hit me like lightning. Here was this passionate, creative man who'd grown into someone ready for a family, and I was stuck in this beige existence, with someone who thought adventure meant trying a new restaurant. The fantasy started small, just daydreaming about what it would be like to have Randy's children, to raise little artists and free spirits instead of mini versions of Sam's methodical approach to everything. But then Randy started talking about it more seriously. How we could make it work, how he was ready to be a real partner this time. The only problem was money. He was between opportunities, focused on his art, not exactly in a position to support a family financially. That's when the idea really took shape. Sam and I had built this stable life, right? Good income, house almost paid off, solid foundation. What if we could combine Randy's passion and creativity with Sam's practical stability? Randy could be involved as the biological father, providing all that artistic influence and emotional depth, while Sam handled the financial side. It wasn't like Sam would be left out, he'd be like a devoted uncle, helping raise these amazing children who'd get the best of both worlds. The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. Sam was always talking about wanting to contribute to something meaningful, about leaving a legacy. What could be more meaningful than helping raise the next generation of creative, passionate human beings? And Randy would bring all the things our household was missing: spontaneity, artistic vision, emotional intelligence. The children would be so lucky to have that combination of influences. I knew Sam would need time to warm up to the idea. He wasn't naturally flexible, preferred to analyze every angle before making decisions. But I also knew he loved me, had always supported my dreams and personal growth. Once he understood how important this was to me, how much it would mean for my fulfillment as a woman and a potential mother, he'd come around. He'd see the beauty in this unconventional but modern approach to family building. Randy and I started planning more concretely. He'd researched the tubal reversal procedure, found clinics that could do it quickly. We talked about timing, about how to approach Sam, about what our co-parenting arrangement might look like. Randy was so excited about the prospect of fatherhood, about finally getting to build the family he'd always secretly wanted. And I was excited about getting to experience pregnancy and motherhood with someone who truly understood my creative, passionate nature. The conversations with Randy became the highlight of my days. While Sam droned on about quarterly reports and home maintenance schedules, I'd be mentally composing my next message to Randy about baby names or nursery themes or how we'd encourage our children's artistic development. Sam's predictability, which had once felt like security, now felt like a prison. His careful, methodical approach to everything seemed so limiting compared to Randy's expansive vision for our future family. I started dropping hints to Sam about feeling restless, about wondering what we were really building together. But he'd just nod and suggest we plan another vacation, or maybe redecorate the living room. He couldn't see that I was outgrowing our small contained life, that I was ready for something bigger and more meaningful. When I mentioned seeing happy families at the park or cute babies at the grocery store, he'd remind me about our agreement, about how we'd chosen our path deliberately. But people change, right? I wasn't the same person who'd agreed to a childless life 15 years ago. I'd evolved, grown, discovered new depths to my maternal instincts. And Randy had evolved too, from the unreliable artist who couldn't commit to the mature man ready to build something beautiful together. It seemed cruel that Sam would want to hold me to decisions I'd made when I was younger and less self-aware. The timing felt perfect. Randy was ready, I was ready, and Sam had the stability to make it all work. All I needed was the courage to present the plan and help Sam see the incredible opportunity we were being offered. This wasn't about leaving our marriage, it was about expanding it, enriching it, bringing new life and energy into our comfortable but stagnant routine. Randy wouldn't be a threat to Sam, he'd be a gift. A way to inject passion and creativity into our predictable existence while building something truly special together. So that Wednesday evening, over our usual pasta dinner, I decided it was time. Sam was going through his typical recap of the day's mundane events, and I could feel Randy's latest message burning in my phone, full of excitement about our future family. The contrast was stark. Sam's beige existence versus Randy's vibrant vision for our lives. I took a breath and jumped in, knowing that this conversation would change everything, confident that once Sam understood the beauty of what we were proposing, he'd be as excited as I was about this next chapter in our lives. Randy reached out, I said, setting down my fork. He wants to have kids with me. Sam's fork clattered against his plate, and I watched his expression shift from confusion to something harder to read. But I pressed on, explaining about the months of conversations, about Randy's growth and maturity, about his desire to finally build the family he'd always secretly wanted. Sam listened with that infuriating calm of his, asking practical questions about logistics and timing when he should have been focusing on the emotional significance of what I was sharing. When I explained that Randy couldn't contribute financially, but would be fully involved as the biological father and emotional guide, Sam's response was so typical of his narrow thinking. He got hung up on the money, on the practical arrangements, completely missing the point about love and passion and creating something beautiful together. I tried to help him understand that this wasn't about replacing him, but about expanding our family in an unconventional but meaningful way. "You want me to raise kids with your ex-boyfriend?" he asked, like I was suggesting something scandalous instead of something revolutionary. "He'd be involved, just not financially," I explained patiently. "He'd be like a devoted uncle who visits, except he's also the biological father. You're making it sound weird when it could be beautiful." But Sam couldn't see past his conventional mindset. He started talking about our original agreement, about the surgery I'd had, like people aren't allowed to grow and change over 15 years. When I pointed out that I was allowed to change my mind about motherhood, he got that stubborn look he always wore when he'd made up his mind about something. "You're not allowed to bring your ex's kids into my house and expect me to pay for them," he said, which completely missed the point about partnership and modern family structures. That's when I knew I needed to be direct. "Our house. Our money. We're married." The look on his face told me everything. He wasn't seeing this as the incredible opportunity it was. He was seeing it as some kind of betrayal. His narrow view of marriage and family was preventing him from understanding the beauty of what Randy and I were offering. But I'd expected resistance. Sam never embraced change easily. "Follow your heart, Peyton," he said finally, and I felt a surge of hope. Maybe he was coming around. Maybe he could see that this was about following my authentic path toward motherhood and fulfillment. "Really? You'll consider it?" I asked, smiling for the first time in months. "No," he said. "I'm saying do what you want, but understand I won't be part of it." The smile died on my face. This wasn't how the conversation was supposed to go. Sam was supposed to need time to process, maybe ask questions about the logistics, eventually come around to seeing the vision Randy and I had created. He wasn't supposed to just shut down the entire idea without even trying to understand what I was going through. But I'd committed to this path, and Randy was counting on me. The next morning, Sam left for work while I researched tubal reversal procedures online. The surgery was more accessible than I'd expected. There were clinics that could do it quickly, privately, professionally. The cost was significant, around $8,000. But that seemed reasonable for the chance to create new life with someone who truly understood my passionate nature. When I slid the credit card authorization form across the breakfast table Monday morning, Sam's reaction was immediate and harsh. He refused to sign, refused to support what he called another man's children, like biology was the only thing that mattered in family formation. I tried to explain that this was a medical procedure, that married couples should support each other's healthcare decisions, but he'd already made up his mind. "It's our money," I pointed out. "We're married." But Sam had this way of twisting everything to make me look unreasonable. He called it funding her reunion tour with Randy, which was such a cruel mischaracterization of what was actually a mature decision about family planning. When I got emotional about his lack of support, he just stood there with that infuriating calm, like my feelings didn't even register. I had to call Jennifer, my sister, just to get some perspective from someone who might actually understand what I was going through. But even she seemed influenced by Sam's narrative, asking questions about Randy's financial contribution instead of focusing on the emotional and creative gifts he'd bring to our children's lives. "He's your husband," Jennifer said. "You support each other." "That's what I'm trying to tell him," I explained. "But he's being financially controlling." The whole situation forced me to take a $10,000 loan from my retirement account with penalties, because Sam refused to support my reproductive choices. He acted like this was some frivolous expense instead of an investment in our family's future. The loan process was humiliating, having to explain to financial advisors why I needed the money when my husband wouldn't sign for a simple medical procedure. Meanwhile, Sam started acting strange, asking me to confirm things in text messages, instead of just talking like normal couples do. He'd text me questions about the surgery, about Randy's involvement, about our future plans, like he was building some kind of case instead of trying to understand my perspective. When I texted back explaining that Randy would provide genetic material and emotional support while Sam handled the practical aspects, Sam's responses were cold and legalistic. "What's Randy's contribution to this team?" he texted, like he was conducting a business meeting instead of discussing our family's future. I tried to explain that Randy would provide artistic influence and emotional depth, that he was rebuilding his life and couldn't contribute financially right now, but Sam seemed determined to misunderstand everything. He kept pushing about money and practical arrangements when the real value Randy brought was intangible. Passion, creativity, spontaneity, all the things our household was missing. The night before surgery, I was packing my overnight bag, actually humming because I was so excited about this next chapter. Randy was driving me to the clinic, wanting to be there for support, which showed the kind of emotional investment Sam had never demonstrated. When I mentioned this to Sam, he made some sarcastic comment about Randy's thoughtfulness, like he couldn't even acknowledge the beauty of having someone who truly cared about my emotional well-being during a medical procedure. "This is a beautiful thing," I told him. "Creating life with Randy. You'll love the kids once they're here. You'll see." But Sam's expression remained closed off, resistant to the vision Randy and I had created for our unconventional but loving family structure. Friday morning, I was at the clinic by 9, feeling optimistic about the future Randy and I were building together. The procedure went smoothly, and I spent recovery time dreaming about the passionate, creative children we'd raise together. Randy stayed close, bringing me water and holding my hand, showing the kind of attentiveness I'd been missing in my marriage. But while I was recovering from surgery, Sam apparently decided to blow up our entire life. My lawyer Sarah called around 11, her voice tight with anger, demanding to know what Sam had just done. Through the post-surgery fog, I learned that he'd filed for divorce, frozen our joint accounts, and basically trapped me financially while I was still in the hospital bed. "Your husband filed for divorce this morning," Sarah explained. "He's frozen all joint accounts and moved his direct deposit. You have no access to funds." The timing was beyond cruel. I'd just undergone a medical procedure to potentially create life, and Sam chose that moment to abandon me completely. When Sarah pointed out that this constituted financial abuse, Sam's response was coldly legal. He claimed it was asset protection during divorce proceedings, like I was some kind of threat instead of his wife of 12 years. "She spent 10 grand on surgery to have another man's babies," I heard him tell Sarah through the phone. "I have texts proving she expected me to raise them." The betrayal was staggering. While I'd been vulnerable and trusting, sharing my deepest hopes about our family's future, Sam had been collecting evidence and planning his attack. He'd manipulated me into those text conversations, getting me to confirm details about Randy's involvement so he could use them against me later. When Randy dropped me off at home Saturday afternoon, I found divorce papers waiting on the kitchen counter. The scream that came out of me felt like it was tearing my throat, but I couldn't help it. 15 years of marriage, and this was how Sam chose to end it, with legal documents served while I was recovering from surgery. I tried to use our credit card to order dinner, basic necessities while I was healing, but everything was declined. The ATM wouldn't give me cash from accounts I'd contributed to for over a decade. Sam had systematically cut off my access to our shared resources, leaving me financially stranded in my own home. When I called Jennifer and Mom and Randy for support, they all came over Sunday morning, but the conversation didn't go the way I'd expected. Instead of rallying around me as a victim of financial abuse, they started questioning the entire arrangement I'd worked so hard to create. "You're a monster," Jennifer said to Sam when he tried to explain his position. She's recovering from surgery. But Sam was unmoved. Surgery I didn't want, didn't approve, and didn't pay for. Mom tried to talk about marriage being about compromise, but Sam's response was harsh and unforgiving. He made it sound like I was asking him to do something unreasonable instead of something beautiful and unconventional. She wants me to raise her ex-boyfriend's children while he plays daddy on weekends, Sam said. Where's the compromise? When Randy finally spoke up, trying to explain that he knew the situation was unconventional, Sam completely shut him down with this brutal assessment of Randy's character and financial situation. He called Randy a master manipulator for convincing me to blow up my marriage for his genetics, which was such a twisted way to describe what was actually a mature conversation between two people who'd grown and evolved over 16 years. The whole confrontation ended with me crying about my incisions hurting, and Jennifer helping me to the guest room because Sam had made it clear I wasn't welcome in our bedroom anymore. The guest room, in my own house, after 12 years of marriage. That evening, I tried to appeal to Sam's memory of our wedding day, reminding him how he'd promised to do anything for me. But he'd become this cold, calculating person I didn't recognize. Within reason, he said. Raising your ex's kids isn't reasonable. When I suggested he could learn to love Randy's children, he compared it to learning juggling, like creating life was some kind of hobby instead of the most meaningful thing two people could do together. Randy had been right when he said Sam felt threatened by our connection, but I hadn't expected Sam's jealousy to manifest in such a destructive way. The next Monday, I tried to set the record straight on social media, posting about how some men can't handle when a woman chooses her own path, about controlling behavior and financial abuse. The response was mixed. Some of my friends understood what I was going through, but others seemed influenced by Sam's version of events. My friend Lisa commented asking if this was about Randy, the guy who dumped you for a 22-year-old, which completely missed the point about growth and second chances. I ended up deleting the post because people were focusing on irrelevant details instead of the real issue, which was Sam's financial manipulation and emotional abandonment. 2 weeks after surgery, I hired Sarah full-time to fight for what I deserved after 15 years of marriage. Our demands were reasonable. Alimony for 5 years, while I rebuilt my life, the house where I'd invested so much emotional energy, half of Sam's retirement that we'd built together, reimbursement for the medical costs Sam had forced me to take loans for, and future child support for the children Randy and I were planning. Sam's lawyer Luis actually laughed when Sarah presented our requests, which showed how little respect Sam had for our marriage and my contributions to our shared life. Their counteroffer was insulting. Standard asset division with no alimony, leaving me responsible for the loan debt Sam had forced on me, like I was some stranger instead of the woman who'd given him 15 years. Sarah fought back with the truth about Sam's behavior, his financial manipulation, his reproductive coercion in trying to prevent me from having children, his abandonment during a medical crisis. But Luis twisted everything to make me sound unreasonable, calling it funding another man's children, instead of supporting a modern family structure. The mediation was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, and I brought Randy for emotional support, since Sam had made it clear he wouldn't provide any. But instead of acknowledging Randy's legitimate role in our family planning, everyone acted like his presence was inappropriate. Is there a reason Mr. Randy is here? Luis asked, like Randy didn't have every right to be involved in discussions about our future children. He's my partner now, I explained, since Sam had abandoned his role in our marriage. Since when? Sam asked, with this ugly tone, like he couldn't understand that his emotional abandonment had forced me to seek support elsewhere. The mediator asked me directly about planning children with Randy while seeking support from Sam. And I tried to explain that children deserve support regardless of biology, that Randy and I were committed to creating life together, and that Sam should honor his marriage vows by helping provide stability for our family. But when the mediator suggested Randy should provide support, Randy had to explain that he's an artist, that his work isn't about money, which everyone seemed to think was some kind of character flaw, instead of a beautiful commitment to creativity over materialism. We couldn't reach an agreement, because Sam refused to see beyond his narrow definition of family and financial responsibility. Luis filed for expedited divorce proceedings, claiming abandonment of marriage covenant, which was rich coming from the man who'd frozen my accounts while I was in the hospital. Meanwhile, Randy had to move in temporarily because his living situation fell through, probably because his roommate couldn't appreciate an artist's irregular income schedule. Sam stayed at his brother's place rather than work out a mature arrangement for sharing the house during our separation, leaving me to handle the mortgage and utilities on my reduced income. I had to change the locks for security reasons since Sam had been acting so unpredictably. But when he showed up Saturday demanding clothes, he called the police like I was some kind of criminal instead of his wife trying to maintain stability during a difficult transition. The officer looked tired before Sam even started explaining, probably because domestic disputes are so common when men can't handle their wives' personal growth. Sam kept insisting the house was his because it was premarital. But I'd lived there for 12 years, contributed to improvements and maintenance, made it a home instead of just a house. "Sir, this is a civil matter," the officer finally said. "You'll need to handle it in court." Randy supported me from the doorway, telling Sam what everyone could see, that he needed to leave and handle this through proper legal channels instead of showing up making demands. But Sam's lawyer filed an emergency motion for exclusive use of the residence, and the judge scheduled a hearing for Wednesday. Then Tuesday night, I got served with papers claiming I'd filed a restraining order against Sam, which was completely backwards. Sarah explained that Sam was trying to paint me as the aggressor, when he was the one who'd shown up aggressively demanding access to a house where I was trying to recover from surgery. The petition Sam filed was full of lies about me harassing him and threatening Randy, about me being controlling with finances when he was the one who'd frozen everything, about me preventing him from starting a family when I was literally trying to create a family and he was the one standing in the way. Wednesday's hearing was a complete circus. I wore a maternity dress to show my commitment to motherhood, even though Randy and I were still working on conception. The judge seemed biased against modern family structures from the start, asking invasive questions about my pregnancy status instead of focusing on Sam's financial abuse. "Mrs. Payton, are you pregnant?" the judge asked. "Not yet, but hopefully soon," I explained. "With Mr. Randy's child?" "Yes, while married to Mr. Sam, who abandoned me by not agreeing to raise another man's children." The judge's silence suggested she couldn't understand the complexity of our situation. Then she denied the restraining order I hadn't even filed and granted Sam exclusive residence, giving Randy and me 48 hours to vacate the home I'd helped build for 12 years. I screamed, actually screamed in court, because the injustice was overwhelming. "This is discrimination. I have rights." "You have the right to pursue your relationship with Mr. Randy," the judge said. Elsewhere, moving day was a nightmare. Sam hired off-duty police for security. Like Randy and I were dangerous criminals instead of people trying to salvage our belongings from a failed marriage. Randy's mom showed up to support us, immediately recognizing the injustice of putting her son on the street when he was trying to build a family with me. "You're putting my son on the street," she told Sam, who responded with this cruel assessment of Randy's employment situation and our relationship, like love and creativity don't matter compared to his precious financial stability. When Randy tried to take the flat-screen TV we'd enjoyed together during our time in the house, Sam produced receipts like he was running a business instead of ending a marriage. The police officer stepped forward to support Sam's property claims, showing how the system is biased against artists and unconventional families. Jennifer tried to advocate for my furniture needs in my new apartment, but Sam refused to show any compassion for my situation. When Mom started recording his behavior to document the financial abuse, Sam's lawyer showed up with legal documents proving the house was premarital. Like that erased 12 years of my emotional investment and contributions. The real heartbreak came when Sam refused to let me take his grandmother's dining set, furniture we'd chosen together, and used for countless family meals. When I explained that I needed it for the children Randy and I were planning, Sam's response was brutal. "What babies? You just had surgery." "The future babies," I tried to explain. "Randy's babies, there is no hour anymore." His cruelty in that moment, refusing to acknowledge the family Randy and I were building, showed how completely he'd abandoned any pretense of caring about my happiness or fulfillment. When I started crying from the emotional pain of his rejection, he called it wasted years, like our entire marriage had been meaningless to him. Randy tried to defend my honor, telling Sam he needed to show some respect, but Sam's response was typical of his jealousy and possessiveness. "You're literally stealing my wife and trying to steal my TV. Get out." We left around 2 in the afternoon with half a truck, because most of the furniture was technically Sam's, even though I'd helped choose it and lived with it for years. My parting words were probably harsh, but I was devastated by his cruelty. "You'll regret this when you die alone." "Better than raising Randy's kids," he replied, showing how little he understood about love and family and the joy children bring to people's lives. 3 days later, Randy and I were staying with Jennifer. But the arrangement wasn't ideal. Jennifer called asking if I could borrow money for our own place, explaining that Randy was processing trauma from the move and needed time to focus on his emotional healing, instead of job searching. When I refused to ask Sam for money, Jennifer admitted the situation was challenging. "Randy won't look for work," she said. "Says he's processing trauma from the move." "They're trying loudly for a baby in my guest room," she continued. "My kids are asking questions." I could hear the judgment in her voice, like she couldn't understand that creating life requires passion and intimacy, that Randy and I were building something beautiful despite the obstacles Sam had created. The divorce was moving forward, with Sarah working hard to get me what I deserved after 15 years of marriage. Our latest offer was reasonable, $50,000 cash for a clean break, but Sam's stubbornness was preventing any reasonable resolution. Randy texted Sam directly, trying to have a mature conversation about our situation, but Sam's responses were hostile and dismissive. When Randy explained that he was trying to be respectful and take care of me, Sam's reply focused entirely on money, like financial contribution was the only measure of a man's worth. "Love doesn't need money," Randy texted back, showing his beautiful priorities. "Babies do," Sam replied coldly. Randy kept trying to explain about destiny and connection, about how he and I were meant to be together, but Sam blocked him instead of engaging in honest dialogue about our situation. Friday afternoon, I went to Sam's workplace to tell him about my pregnancy, hoping that the reality of new life might soften his heart toward our family. But his reaction was immediate skepticism instead of joy. "Already? It's been 3 weeks since the surgery." When I explained that the doctor said it was possible, Sam offered cold congratulations to Randy instead of acknowledging his potential role in our child's life. I tried to explain that the baby was innocent, that Sam could still be involved like an adoptive father, but he refused to consider the beautiful family structure we could create. "You could be the father, like an adoption," I suggested, but Sam's response was dismissive, and even the security guards seemed to find our conversation amusing, instead of recognizing the serious family planning discussions we were having. When I told him this wasn't over, that we could still work things out, Sam's response was final and cruel. "Actually, it is." 2 months later, the divorce was finalized with standard asset division that ignored my 15 years of emotional investment and contribution to our shared life. I received about $73,000 total, far less than I deserved, but enough to start rebuilding. The house appreciation buyout was something, but not the security I'd expected after so many years of marriage. The pregnancy turned out to be a false alarm. My period came 2 weeks after that conversation at Sam's work, which Jennifer confirmed to everyone like it was some kind of scandal, instead of a natural part of the conception process. Randy and I had been so excited about the possibility of new life that the disappointment was crushing. Randy lasted exactly 34 days after the divorce was finalized. Once the reality hit that there was no house, no steady income, just my $73,000 that was draining fast on apartment deposits and furniture, he started talking about needing to find himself. His note said the situation wasn't working, that he was sorry, which showed how little he understood about commitment and working through challenges together. He took $5,000 I'd withdrawn for baby furniture, money that was meant for our future family, and disappeared to Costa Rica with some other woman. The betrayal was devastating, but it also showed his true character. When things got difficult, when we needed to work together to build something real, he chose the easy path of running away with someone who probably had fewer complications in her life. I called Sam at 2 a.m. when I found Randy's note, needing someone who understood what I was going through. But his response was cold and indifferent. He left me, I told him through tears. Okay, Sam said, like my pain meant nothing to him. That's all you have to say? What did you expect me to say? When I explained that I'd given up everything for Randy, Sam's response was harsh. Yes, you did. He seemed almost satisfied by my suffering, like he'd been waiting for Randy to reveal his true character. You must be happy, I said. I'm indifferent, he replied, which was somehow worse than anger or satisfaction. When I asked about coming home, Sam made it clear that wasn't an option anymore. That's not your home anymore, he said. We had 15 good years and you threw them away for Randy. The finality in his voice was crushing, but I hung up before he could say anything else hurtful. According to Jennifer, who still texts occasionally, I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment now, working overtime to cover expenses. The dating apps are challenging because explaining my recent tubal reversal for an ex's children isn't something most men find appealing, apparently. Randy posted from Costa Rica last week, finding himself through art and adventure with another woman. Younger, of course, just like his pattern 16 years ago. Mom called once trying to convince me to ask Sam for help, saying I was struggling, but I explained that Sam was the one who'd created this situation by being controlling and refusing to embrace our modern family vision. She said I seemed confused, but I was actually more clear-sighted than I'd been in years. I could see exactly how Sam's narrow-mindedness and financial manipulation had destroyed what could have been something beautiful. Sam apparently got some kind of career advancement at work, redecorated the entire house, and started dating someone casually. Nothing serious, but Jennifer mentioned that his new girlfriend has never asked him to fund her ex-boyfriend's children, which seems like a low bar for relationship success. The worst part was Sam sending me a Christmas card. Actually, me sending him one. A photo of me by my Christmas tree in my apartment with a message inside about thinking of better times and maybe new chances in the new year. When I texted Jennifer asking if Sam had responded, she said he'd asked if I was serious about the card. She's convinced you'll take her back eventually, Jennifer told him, according to her report to me. Based on what? Sam had asked. Delusion mostly, Jennifer replied, which was hurtful, but probably reflected her inability to understand the depth of connection Sam and I had built over 15 years. Jennifer said I keep telling people that Sam and I are meant to be, that Randy was just a mistake that cost me everything. She said I call Randy the mistake now, which isn't entirely fair. Randy showed me what passion and creativity could look like, even if he wasn't strong enough to build something lasting when things got complicated. I've been considering moving back to my hometown where rent is cheaper, and I could stay with my parents while rebuilding my life. Mom would probably enjoy having me around, and she could help me process everything that happened with Sam and Randy. The city holds too many memories of the life Sam and I built together, the dreams Randy and I shared, the disappointment of watching both relationships end in their own ways. Looking back, I can see that Sam and I had something real for those 15 years. The comfortable life we built wasn't nothing, even if it lacked the passion I was craving. And Sam's support through my original surgery, his steady presence through all those years, his willingness to build something stable, maybe those qualities were worth more than I realized at the time. Randy brought excitement and creativity into my life, reminded me of parts of myself I'd forgotten, showed me what it felt like to be truly desired and understood. But when it came time to build something,